So today's podcast is going to be awesome because I have a question from one of you guys, and you guys sent that in to me. And if you guys want to send more questions in, feel free in the jot form below. Submit your question. I will get to all of them. I can't promise everyone's going to have its own episode, but I will address them in my content some way, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So today the question was from Alicia Macklin, and she asked, how are people affording a financial coach while in financial crisis? And I want to break this down because I think this is a really, really valid question. And I also get this quite a bit. I have a lot of people that are on the edge to joining Budget Dog Academy. They've signed up, they went through the process, and they're like, man, I really want to. I just don't have the money. Like literally, I don't have the cash right this second, but I don't know when I'm going to get it either. And so I want to walk you through specifically the way you want to think about this, because if you think about this in the way the question was presented, you're going to continue to think you don't have. You're always going to operate from a scarcity, right? I can't have. And you've got to get out of that mindset to actually move forward and get real progress. And so I'm going to ask you a question back first. Actually, two of them is, how can't you afford it? And number two is, how much is it costing you? And I want you to think about that for a second. How much is not knowing what we know over here in Budget Dog Academy costing you? I'm going to walk you through an actual example. I think a lot of people don't even know where I'm going at with this because they don't understand the concept of opportunity cost loss. And I think it's a really important concept to understand. So if I just don't know something, and I could be doing it with an alternative, and I just don't do it, what could that become? That's the opportunity cost lost. Because if I don't know about this asset or the education or whatever the case is, I'm blocked in some sort of way. I don't have access to it. I don't have education to it. And it's sitting right here. And if I put my money into the asset, it would grow to X dollars. But because I don't know, or I have limited access, and I go to this alternative over here, what is the separation cost between the two options, the two decisions that I'm going to make? And that's opportunity cost lost. And you got to be really careful about this, because a lot of times people don't understand the concept of money, which then in turn creates all sorts of other bigger issues and gets them to ask this question ultimately when you don't need to be asking this question. So I'm going to walk you through an example. So let's just put it out there. So if I had an asset returning 5% and another asset at 10%, and I put money into the asset returning 5%, would it be worth, because I just didn't know, I didn't have access, I put it into this alternative versus the 10% over here we just talked about, would it be worth to pay a financial coach to teach me, to educate me, to put my money into the asset returning 10%, ultimately yielding better results? I think we all can agree, yes. So the question is, how do we know the difference between the 5% asset and the 10% asset? Oftentimes we don't, unless we have education. And quite honestly, guys, growing up, I didn't have the education either. And I made this horrendous mistake by doing exactly what I'm talking about. So that's why I talk about this so much. I made a bunch of money from my jobs, McDonald's jobs and all these different jobs I had. And I put my money in this alternative. The one that we're talking about kind of stinks. It's called a bank account. And I put my money in a bank account, and I thought, saving money was the way to go. I thought I was being, a grown up and really saving all my money, when in fact, I could have just invested that money over here in this better asset, yielding, let's call it 10%. And my return long-term would have been $1 million difference. And this is actually factual numbers over a 20-year period, but I didn't know. So I lost $1 million, and that was the opportunity cost lost. And I want to prevent you from being me. Most of my stuff is saying, hey, I did this mistake. Don't do what I did. Be smarter than me. And I hope this framework can help you. I'm a big believer in know better, do better. And when I started knowing better, because I followed my Deloitte mentors and got in circles of wealth, I just started doing better naturally, because they told me better, more advanced type of wealth building strategies. And it was actually not that hard once I knew. So let's draw this number out a little bit, right? So let's actually take $2,500. Let's say we're investing $2,500 and we don't know necessarily where to put it. Well, if I put $2,500 a month to a 10% asset, let's say this guy over here, for 30 years versus this guy over here at 5%, same situation, what do you think my difference would be? What is the opportunity cost lost? $3 million. So this guy over here yielding 10% in that situation would have $4.9 million at the end of 30 years. The person that just didn't know better, they didn't have access to this asset because they didn't pay for access, whatever the case is, they just didn't have access to this, or they didn't make the good decision because they just didn't know, put their money over here into, let's call it, lower yielding asset, and their return was 1.9 versus 4.9, a $3 million difference. So you have to ask yourself, what was the cost of that financial coaching up front? Let's say it was $5,000. Let's say it was $10,000. Does that feel as expensive anymore? I would venture to say no. I would say, well, I lost $3 million. Now I see it that way. Man, I would do anything and everything to get that $5,000 to $10,000 to pay the coach to know and learn better at a younger age, because I know time is my biggest wealth building factor. So if I delay this, I can't ever make this back up. So right now, right here, does it make sense to move forward and spend the money to get the financial coach, whether it be on credit, whether it be my last, last dollars I have to make it work, whether it be from side hustle income? Is it worth it? You have to answer that question for yourself. I would have to say, yeah, because I've lived this and I've done this and I've seen this real time work for myself. When I pay coaches, when I join masterminds, when I join wealth circles that I've joined, literally today, this is, I talk from experience, so I have examples on a daily basis. I'm part of a wealth generating circle, an entrepreneur circle. They were talking about building buying a business, a CPA firm, in fact, in particular. And they gave me an opportunity to buy a firm that's yielding $1.5 million in profits. Because I'm part of that circle, I have access. I'm not restricted because I'm part of this circle. Now you have to ask yourself, is it always worth paying? Maybe not. Depends. Sometimes you can provide value. And so when you really understand the dollar and how the dollar is constructed and really understand money, the core concept of money, it's an exchange of value. So to join these groups, to get access, to do all these different things, there's two ways that you're going to pay. You're either going to exchange value, like I've done with this entrepreneurship group. I've been able to give immense value to them on a business perspective and all sorts of wealth building perspectives to get access to this deal or to this group, which in turn gives me access to all these deals, throwing out opportunities to buy CPA firms, businesses. I've made tons of connections. I've had real estate syndications come through here, all sorts of different awesome things that have built my wealth exponentially as a result. Or let's say this group over here, I didn't necessarily have the skill sets quite yet, but I did know that this individual or these groups over here had awesome value. And so they were, let's say, charging $5,000 or $25,000 to join this group. Would it make sense to join that group? I would say yes. And I know for a fact in my situation, it has been an absolute definitive yes. And so understand that core concept of money, of it's an exchange of value, and stop thinking you have to hoard onto these dollars, these green paperbacks, just to feel wealthy. That's a really risky way to do business. We'll talk about that in a second. But all you have to do and think about is, when you're understanding the core concept of money, how do I leverage the green paperback to get more value into my life? Not everything comes down to a dollar. It's experience. I trade $2,500 or $10,000 to go onto a sweet vacation. That's an experience. I've exchanged the value with the dollar for an experience. Same concept. And so you have to understand, 80% of millionaires, guys, were first generation millionaires. So most of the time, no one starts with money. And that was the same situation with me. And so how do you get from nothing to something? Oftentimes it's education, access, and coaching, which is exactly the question that was asked. How are people affording a financial coach while in financial crisis? I would be doing everything in my assuming there's a few things that you want to assume here, is that you know the break-even point when you invest in this program, when you invest in this coach. What is my break-even point? When am I going to make my money back? Understand that timeline, because that's important. Do I have enough money to sustain myself, or figure out from a credit perspective how to sustain myself? And then number two is trust the person. Like the most common sense thing, use your gut, guys. Like this is such a this question comes up all the time. Like, how do I know this is like the real deal? It's like, I don't know, go online, like check, like there's so much online evidence of good versus bad versus in between, that you can go do your searches. You can go to people's LinkedIn. You can see the coaching program results, like my Trustpilot, for example. You can see all the testimonials we post every single day on Budget Dog Academy IG page. There are so many ways to figure out if someone's legit. Go to their LinkedIn. That's probably the first sign. But, the other thing is crazy is, like, I'm a national bestseller, CPA, host of this podcast. I've helped thousands of people. There's results all over the world, and people will be new to me and they won't know. I'm like, guys, I'm not going to sit here and convince you that I'm like not a scammer. Like first off, if I was, I wouldn't tell you. That's just whatever. Use some common sense though, man. Like people don't have common sense out here. And so they're like, well, I don't know if it's real. It's like, I don't know. Maybe I have a good gut judgment, good gut feeling, but it feels like it's pretty easy to tell who's real and who's not. And so the thing is, once you trust that person, once you do the due diligence, you have the confidence, like others, like your situation, that have worked with that individual and had success, and you know your break-even point. Now it's just a decision of risk. Managing risk at a high level is a very important concept for wealthy individuals. They know how to manage risk. And you might be thinking, like, Well, it's risky to take the chance on this, but ask yourself the question this as well. It's paradigm shift again. What's the risk of staying the same? What's the risk of having the struggle every single week and every single night that you literally live of feeling financially, the inability to get ahead financially and feel like you're always behind? What's that risk? What is that costing you? Your health, your well-being, your life, over $5,000, $10,000. What are you trying to, what is your measuring tool for value and exchange of value? Because I can tell you this, is if I gave you the opportunity to buy a Lamborghini for $5,000, I know a lot of people out there would find the $5,000. They would get real creative really fast. Nothing wrong with the Lamborghini. I just, discount it for whatever I'm giving as a gift, whatever the case is. I give you a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 Lamborghini. You're like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So sometimes it's not even about having the money. It's about seeing the value. And so, in your head, Lamborghinis are typically like $250,000. He's giving it to me for this. There's nothing wrong. If I'm not missing anything, it makes a lot of sense from a value perspective. And that's oftentimes why the financial coach that you're asking for help from, you're not moving forward with, because you have some sort of internal dialogue with yourself that I don't know if what I'm forking over dollar-wise is going to amount to the value I'm receiving. And if you can prove that out and know your break-even point, let's say 2.5 months in this situation, which is my average student, in fact, if I know 2.5 months, I'm going to get my return on the dollars that I spent, I know anything after that, I'm break even, and then it's only plus. And if you have a lifetime group like we have in the academy, think how much value can come over a lifetime with that. In fact, I can tell you right now, it would be 6 to 7 figures difference. And I know that for a fact because there's documented proof and evidence of statistics within our academy that state exactly that. And so we see all sorts of problems and people doing the wrong things. And so if you know better, you do better, right? And so think about this, guys. Warren Buffett, man, he's one of the richest guys in the world, but that guy started out with hardly anything, a couple $100. How did he get to the level he's at today? He took the dollar, he exchanged it for for education, for skill sets, and he produced value to the economy to then therefore receive value back. And that's all he did over and over and over and over again. He got so good at what he did that people kept paying him more money and more money and more money and more money. And then he proved to the public that he's the legitimate and real deal. So then people started investing in Berkshire Hathaway, his company. And so he continued to increase his worth and worth and worth and worth. And that is the ever-ending cycle of wealth. And it's not as complicated as people make it out to be. People overcomplicate this game of wealth. And I'm going to actually film a podcast here very shortly about the wealth framework and how, even answering and addressing this question, how you can start with nothing and end up with a lot. And if you know better, you'll do better. And I can guarantee that wealth is a mindset, guys. It's not a dollar amount. And so when you start to think like wealthy people, you will naturally, the dollars will follow you, but you'll start to advance in many different ways in your life. And like I've always said, at what point do you want it bad enough? At what point are you going to take a risk? And I think that's actually a poor use of words, take a risk. I would say assess your risk, because at what point are you going to shift your risk from holding cash, not knowing what to do, feeling in a bad situation, feeling anxious about money, and transfer that risk into somebody with education, knowledge that's been there, done that, and actually take the chance and then improve your situation as a result? When are you going to assess that? When are you going to have a better judgment internally about the level of risk you're willing to take on? And I think the quicker you understand this concept and you re-listen to this podcast and you really think about this, the quicker you will move forward with education, assets, whether it be investing, whatever the case is, mentorship, access, skill sets, investing in yourself some way, somehow. You're going to understand that you're going to get wealthier that way. And that's going to change the game for you forever. And I want everybody to see and understand this at a deep level, because a lot of people are sitting there nervous, worried, anxious, and they're afraid to let go of a dollar because they're operating from a scarcity mindset, like we said in the very, very beginning. So I want to go back to the very first question I asked you. By not doing this, by not getting the financial coaching that you need, how much is that costing you at the end of the day? I will leave you with that, and I will see you guys next week.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brendan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.